Welcome to Gab Jam, episode 164.
And what are we talking about today?
Okay, so this episode, of course, you've heard imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yes.
And that probably works for making a pizza.
Yeah.
But as musical artists or as creators in general, you want to be known for your individual style.
Yes.
So the question is, would you ever consider copying someone else's style? And so let me give you a heads up. Our focus is going to be 3 reasons why you might want to copy someone's style.
Why? So I think a lot of musicians start off there. So just like I started off playing a song, and that's Stanley Clarke. You know what I mean? That's who I kind of took that from. That's who. For me, growing up, I heard Stanley Clarke.
Like that is your...
No, that's just my interpretation.
Right.
So that's me taking his style.
Right.
So it's sort of like, I grew up, wanting to play the bass, and once I saw Stanley Clarke, heard Stanley Clarke, I mean, that just solidified it for me, So it's, and then I saw him playing on the Midnight Special, and the way he played chords, that became the way I play chords.
Yeah.
So that's. But it's an interpretation of that. So I know it doesn't sound like, meaning that you won't hear me playing and say, is that Stanley Clarke? No.
Mm-hmm.
But, that is me stealing.
Using that as a basis for your own original song.
Yeah.
Right. It has the style. Okay, so that kind of goes to one of our tips was using inspiration from other people as a tool.
Yes.
So that's where you start. So like you said, when you first start playing, generally when you first pick up an instrument, a lot of people start by,
Yeah, you do. I mean, sometimes it's just the way that you even play the instrument.
Yeah.
You took that from somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you looked at it, you say, okay, you use your fingers like this, you do this.
Yeah.
You kind of take these things from people.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people sometimes who, even go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like when you start watching people doing the 2-hand tapping stuff and all the rest of that type of stuff that, has kind of evolved. Those are people who are even more innovative as far as that. But I think the majority of musicians who are out there, we are hybrids of, kind of the people we've seen playing, and it just of all these different people, all this stew that comes together that makes up the gumbo that becomes your style. You kind of take in all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, so that brings me to the next thing is to understand that it is the step. Thank you.
Yeah.
To finding your own style. And I was listening to Art Juice podcast, and I'm paraphrasing this, but they said when you're copying someone's style, what you get wrong is the you coming through.
It is.
So that kind of helps you find your own voice.
Right.
But with the inspiration that they provided.
I agree. And I think that sometimes it's almost helpful if you end up not being at that point where you can get things exactly right.
Okay.
Because I think there's certain like vocalists. There are certain vocalists who might be able to imitate a particular singer to the T.
Right.
And any singer to the T. And I think for those individuals, it becomes a lot harder to find your own voice. Just simply because people hear you and they say, oh, wow, you sound just like such and such.
Right.
And so now you have this thing where you feel like, okay, what people like to hear from me is when I sound just like Michael Jackson or whoever the vocalist of the day might be.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that kind of takes you away from actually finding your own voice.
Yeah.
Because other people start liking you for what you're doing imitating somebody else,
Yes.
and so I think for those people, you have to take more of a concentrated effort.
Right, to deviate.
And that's
to
get away from
when
that.
you feel like, quote unquote, you've been successful.
Right.
Using
something that kind of got you to this point, and then to kind of deviate from that becomes a lot harder. Whereas sometimes when you are that person that falls short, it kind of helps because what you do is you find you.
Yeah.
In between the scene, you find your interpretation of that.
And I actually want to say that I kind of feel that way with Prince and getting booed off the stage with the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Because when I go back and look at that footage, from that time period, he seemed like he was imitating Mick Jagger.
Right.
So dare I say that if he hadn't been thrown off the path, I'm not saying he would have been exactly like Mick Jagger, but if he hadn't been thrown off the path where, okay, that is really not... that audience is not going to accept you. You need to find like your own thing, or he cocooned back up and came back out with something else.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that maybe that was what helped, him find this other more unique voice. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because I think, I know for him, he got to a point where he decided, okay, I'm not going to open up for anyone else.
Right.
I'm not going to do this anymore. And so now, he got the time became his opening act, and he decided, he kind of started following his own path.
Yeah.
That, led him to Purple Rain.
Yeah.
But, even like with Prince, I don't know, Prince might have been someone who could play just like whoever.
Right.
But, it seems like early on, he kind of had his own, I guess, take on stuff.
Yes.
It's sort of like, even when I hear him play a song like Sweet Thing by, Rufus and Chaka Khan, he doesn't play it exactly like the record. He plays a Prince interpretation of that song. Right. And so I think even for me, that's, I don't think I ever learned a record verbatim. Mm-hmm. I tried to take like a general feel of the record.
Yeah, he's real good at
that. And then, kind of on top of that, say, okay, I'm going to do my kind of spin on it. Yeah. From that point on, and it kind of helps. Because again, in the cracks is where you start finding your voice, and reinterpretations of songs too. I think that's the thing is, I think early on for me, when I would learn a song, I would start turning songs backwards, turning them this way, turning them that way, just trying to see, okay, what else can I come up with off of this one riff, So it's sort of like doing that is, I think it was Give It To Me Baby. I realized that playing it on the bass, it's like, if you play it backwards, it's super free.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So, it was sort of like, but it was these type, or like, Burn Rubber. Mm-hmm. I think before Bad Mama Jamma had come out, I remember messing around with that bass line. It's like, after a while, I had stumbled on that Bad Mama Jamma bass line. So when I heard that, I said, I know that bass line. Right. That's Burn Rubber. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I remember turning that thing around and just playing with it. Yeah. And I think even there, that's where you start kind of finding your voice. Yeah.
And then I know you talked about this one before, but one other reason why you might want to copy someone else's style is to add a twist. Yeah. To something like you were talking about in one of the other episodes about injecting maybe chords that you don't use, or trying a style that you don't normally do, to kind of add something to what you do is tried and true, and you're like, okay, I'm tired of doing exactly the same thing from song to song, so let me try, let me put a little bit of
a little bit of this in there. I mean, that I think early on in the 80s, everybody was throwing that little tapping part in there, that because Van Halen had made that very popular with the guitar. It's like Victor Wooten and the double thumping. Kind of really made that kind of, popular. Or, you hear from Marcus Miller and other bass players, but, so there might be certain things that you will kind of take and say, okay, I want to throw this into what I do. Right. Just to kind of, add a little extra voice to who I am, So I think it is good to kind of have that, always be open to kind of taking these techniques, because sometimes too, like I was saying before, there are some people who are innovating on these instruments, and they can open your your mind to things that maybe you thought wasn't even possible on the instrument.
That's true.
You know, until you kind of hear them. You know, and you kind of like, wow. You know, and we were talking about that before. You know, whether it was Stanley Clarke or Jaco Pastorius, or you know, especially with bass players, or you know, or Larry Graham and the thumping and plucking. And, you know, and that's why I just always say all that stuff, I think should be on the table, because I hear certain people say, I never thought that.
Right.
You know, and that's fine, but I guess for me, it's kind of like, I can't let go any of those techniques, because I just see it as a technique. As long as you can do it in a way that's musical. You know, I mean, you know, because sometimes I think some people get obsessed with the technique and all you hear is technique.
And I think that's also the same thing for me with genre.
Right.
I guess that is always the thing of what being influenced was saying, that we were talking about that if it is country, typically it would have, you know, maybe like a banjo or, you know, some of those other things. So incorporating some of that into funk, or some of that into, you know, like a more electronic sound, to me would give it some extra flavor. It's just opening yourself up to something that is unusual to what you would normally do.
Right, you know, it's like I've heard like numerous musicians say, hey, there's only two types of music, good and bad. You know what I mean? And that's it. And it's like, you know, so they don't get lost on genre.
Titles,
you know, as they're kind of like, this is what I like, this is what I don't like.
Right.
You know, so what falls in what I might like is some of everything.
Right.
You know,
like
what
that.
falls in what I don't like is some of everything. You know? And so that's kind of
I like that, because that's kind of how I feel about most of it. Okay, so this is the true way to know if you have overstepped the line with copying somebody else's style. So the way that you know that you are doing too much when it comes to copying is that either you're being sketchy and you're trying to pass that off as your own. I mean, exactly. Off as your own original work. Or you don't feel proud of the work. If you don't feel proud of it, then more than likely there's something about it that your conscience is bothering you about. That you've taken a little bit too much of it. And maybe you need to twist it up a little bit more to take more ownership of the groove or whatever it is.
Or, too, I mean, you want to pay attention to what other people say. So maybe you come out feeling great about what you're doing, but everybody keeps saying you sound just like blah, blah, blah. You know, you sound just like, oh, that sounds just like blah, blah, blah. You sound just like blah, blah, blah. You just, you know, and if you're getting the same thing from everybody, you know, then you might be sounding just like blah, blah, blah. You know, I know early on, you know, I used to hear I sound like Prince, but, you know, I used to also hear I sound like Rick James. You know, I also would hear, you sound like Cameo. You know, so I would kind of hear different people. And that gave me a little bit more solace of saying, okay, you know.
Yeah, because you kind of didn't like hearing all the time that you sounded like Prince. There was something about that didn't feel like you were expressing who you were.
Or just sometimes even when I felt that way. So there was a certain point in time where I had like, you know, all of Prince's cassettes, and I gave them away. You know what I mean? Because of the fact that it was like, I don't want to hear it. I want to get away from that and kind of let other things kind of, you know, start influencing what I'm doing. You know, as opposed to just that. You know, I mean, because I started to feel like this sounds a little bit too much like that. I'm drinking too much from this one well.
I think I was like that with the wardrobe at one time. That I went down the Prince rabbit hole for a minute, and then after a while I was like, okay, I don't want to. This was just me. I didn't want to look like I was in the Prince band. Even though I really admired Prince, you know, I wanted to be a peer and not a follower or flunky. I guess that's the way I felt. So I had to start stepping back and saying, okay, I got to mix it up a little bit. So yeah, I get that. All right, what do you think? Does imitation have its place within the creative process? You let us know. Drop it in the comments below. What else?
Yes. So Sugarfit. So Sugarfit's available everywhere that you will stream music. Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, wherever place that you might stream it. Amazon. Also, you can go to the Bandcamp page.
Yes.
You can download, a virtual copy of Sugar Fit. If you want to have the CD like what I have in front of my face right now, you can get that from us. You can get that from CD Baby.
Yes.
So, and again, anytime if you feel like, hey, I'm confused, I don't know where to get it, you can always email us.
Yes.
Or you can just put in the comments, hey, where do I get Sugar Fit?
Right.
We will definitely respond to that.
I love it. And we also have a vinyl campaign going on Patreon. The link will be below, so that if you want your very own 2-disc set, you can or pre-order it. All right. Yeah. All right. If you dig the vibe and you want to be a part of the tribe, be sure to
subscribe.
We're wishing you love, peace, and
chicken grease.